The famous French general Napoleon Bonaparte said, "Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." The Democrats have just made a terrible mistake on the issue of gun control with their House vote in support of an assault weapon ban. Stay tuned. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, constitutional attorney, member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar, best-selling author, and proud American gun owner. If you haven't already subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do so and show your love for the right to keep and bear arms. Okay, folks, so the House of Representatives under Nancy Pelosi just passed a so-called assault weapon ban, which of course is banning semi-automatic style rifles and similar weapons, among other anti-gun proposals. Now, at first glance, you may say this is terrible news because a part of the government passed a gun ban. But I actually don't tell the anti-gunners this. I actually think this is actually good news for the gun rights movement in the United States for many reasons. In my view, this is going to terribly backfire, not just in the short term, but over many years against the anti-gun movement. Now, either they did not understand this is what's about to happen to them, which will be very bad for their agenda, or they don't care because they have some other constituents. Maybe they have large donors with a lot of money that gives them a lot of money, and they had to do it because to sate those people. But either way, this is ultimately going to turn out to be very good news for the gun rights movement and the Second Amendment, and let me tell you why. You know, the anti-gunners go out there and say things like, we support the Second Amendment and we don't want to take away anybody's firearms. We just want there to be reasonable regulations and gun safety measures. That's all we really want. This vote demonstrates that is all one big lie. This vote has put the Democrats on the record permanently that they want to ban guns and take guns away and ultimately confiscate guns and disarm Americans. At that same moment in American history where these same Democratic politicians are supporting no bail, which means no jail for criminals, are supporting defunding of the police, are supporting open borders so any criminal can walk across the southern border, on and on and on. So basically the same people that are undercutting law and order in America are the same people that are going on the record in Washington, D.C. that they want to disarm Americans. So on that level, that's very good politically because I don't think that's going to play in the contested states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and the like. Maybe it will give them some votes in Manhattan, but no one cares about that place anyway because, you know, they're all full of liberals anyway. So they're all going to vote for the Democrats and people like AOC and the like in New York City. Number one. Okay, so the second point is this. It's a legal point. And this is a subtle point that I think most people will not understand. If you and I were going to enter into an agreement, I want to comment it this way. If you and I are going to enter into an agreement and we like each other and we've known each other for 30 years and we've always had a good relationship, our agreement may consist of, hey, I'm going to give you some money and you're going to fix my house. Or I'm going to give you some money and you're going to fix my fence. And that's it. Just an oral understanding, nothing in writing. But if I change that scenario and I say that the person that you're giving money to is Chuck Schumer in a political matter, you're going to basically want to nail down every contingency. Your agreement with Chuck Schumer in a political matter is probably going to be like 100 pages long. It's going to be single-spaced, and it's going to capture every conceivable thing that can go wrong because you're going to assume that Chuck Schumer is acting in bad faith. Now, why is this relevant to the Second Amendment? It's really quite simple. Courts, in particular the U.S. Supreme Court, now understand, I think they already knew this, but now they really understand this, that they are dealing with the anti-gun agenda and the Democratic Party as a group of bad faith actors when it comes to Second Amendment rights, which means that when courts, including the Supreme Court, write future Second Amendment opinions that explain not only who wins, but also how they win, they're going to write these opinions so clearly and such detail that they're going to foreclose any wiggle room for an anti-gun judge or anti-gun politicians to get around it, because now the Supreme Court and the other pro-Second Amendment type judges that are in the federal system, for example, are going to understand that if they don't nail down every single item, if they don't cross every T and dot every I, the anti-gun community, including the Democratic Party and the Democratic politicians, are going to try to eviscerate the Second Amendment. And that means the opinions on Second Amendment issues and gun rights issues are going to be more robust and stronger than ever before, because the courts are going to be writing these opinions with bad faith actors in mind, as opposed to people that are going to try to come together and be acting good faith to follow the rules. They're assuming bad faith, and that's going to actually benefit us tremendously in the opinions that are written in favor of the Second Amendment. Now, the next thing that's key to understand is this, that these types of terrible, stupid votes, and they're stupid from the point of view of the Democrats, have a long tail, a long ripple effect. Let me remind you of two things. When the quote-unquote assault weapon ban of 1994 passed, it passed, I believe, in September/early October of 1994, right before, let's say a month or two before the November midterm elections of 1994. In those midterm elections, the Democrats got crushed so terribly because of the assault weapon ban that had just passed that Newt Gingrich became the first Republican Speaker of the House in literally decades and decades and decades. Okay? Why? Because the assault weapon ban passed. So in the short run, the Democrats got destroyed politically in the 1994 midterm elections. But that's not all. You see, the ripple effects, again, on these gun-type votes really they go on and on and on. Here's an example. Let's fast forward 6 years from 1994 assault weapon ban days to the year of our Lord 2000. Well, you may recall that 2000 was a presidential election year between Al Gore from Tennessee and George W. Bush from Texas. And if you may recall, the election came down to Florida. And George Bush clearly won Florida despite the litigation, but the bottom line is George Bush won Florida and won the election. Now, here's the key point. What are two states that Al Gore lost? He lost his home state of Tennessee, and he lost the home state of Bill Clinton, the president at the time, for whom Al Gore was the vice president. So Al Gore lost in the 2000 election Arkansas, which was Bill Clinton's home state, and lost Tennessee, Al Gore's home state. And why did he lose these two sort of southern states, these gun states? Because of this gun position articulated in the 1994 assault weapon ban. So again, these things have a long life. And usually, again, and the good news is these are really going to have a long ripple effect. And last but not least, this demonstrates beyond a doubt, in my view, that the Democratic Party has no interest in the rule of law, and they only care about power. Here's why I say this. We talked about this before in a video discussing Jerry Nadler, who was the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, where he admitted twice, no less, that it was the goal of the committee and the goal of this bill to ban, in America, commonly possessed firearms, which are commonly possessed semi-automatic rifles and, presumably some sort of handguns if they could get there. But here's the key. This was literally less than a month after the U.S. Supreme Court had reiterated for no fewer than the fourth time in the last 15 years or so that commonly possessed firearms for lawful purposes held by Americans are protected under the Second Amendment. They are protected arms, as in the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Well, what arms are protected? Well, at a minimum, they're those arms that are commonly possessed by Americans for lawful purposes. And Jerry Nadler, at the start of this whole discussion of this bill, literally admitted on the record that this violated the Second Amendment. It violated the Supreme Court's specific rule on this. And yet they've now gone forward and passed the bill, which to me is the ultimate thumbing of the nose, if you will, of the Supreme Court and the rule of law. Because I keep hearing, every time I hear about the January 6th committee, I hear phrases like, we must save democracy, we must save the rule of law. And yet here the Democrats had a chance to follow the rule of law, the text of the Second Amendment, and the Supreme Court's interpretation in no fewer than 4 separate cases. Heller, McDonald, Caetano, Bruin, you know them well if you watch this channel because you're the smartest person in the room because you watch this channel on the Second Amendment. They ignored specific language in all 4 cases that said these arms are protected firearms under the Second Amendment, and they still voted to ban them in violation of the Second Amendment's text and in violation of the Supreme Court's ruling. So again, anytime the Democrats say, we believe in the rule of law and democracy, and we must save and preserve democracy and the rule of law and blah, 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 this yammering really rings hollow in light of what the House has just done with passing a clear violation of the Second Amendment. And last but not least, the good news is this is clearly not going anywhere in the United States Senate. The filibuster is well in place. And, John Cornyn and the Republicans have already said they're not touching guns again for a long time. They never should have touched guns the last time, but that's a whole separate issue. We've talked about that before. It was a terrible decision by the Republicans. I sometimes wonder who the heck's, advising these people. But again, that's a discussion for another day. But the bottom line is, do not fear. This House vote to ban firearms and do other sorts of forms of gun control will ultimately be to our tremendous benefit, and it will ultimately hurt terribly the agenda of the anti-gunner community. You just watch. Okay, hope you learned a little bit something here today at the Four Boxes Diner. And again, if you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we'll see you again soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.